The sun was bright over the quiet street of Willow Creek. Houses stood neatly in rows, each with trimmed lawns and shining mailboxes. Yet behind the peaceful look, there was something else, something that always made the people tense. It was the presence of the Homeowners Association, the HOA. The HOA in Willow Creek was strict. They had rules for the size of the grass, the color of the fences, and even how long a car could stand in the driveway. Most neighbors followed the rules in silence, not because they liked them, but because they feared the endless fines. In one of the houses lived Blake and his wife Maria. They had moved to Willow Creek 3 years ago. To many people, Blake seemed like an ordinary man. He spent time fixing his yard, reading newspapers on the porch, and talking with Maria in the evenings. No one asked much about his past, and he never offered details. Maria was warm and friendly, the kind of woman who always had a smile for neighbors. One morning, as Maria opened the mailbox, she found another letter from the HOA. It was a fine. The reason was written in bold words: "Your flower bed does not meet the approved pattern." Maria's smile faded as she read it. She carried the letter inside and placed it on the kitchen table. When Blake walked in, he noticed her face. "What happened?" he asked. "It's another fine," Maria said, handing him the paper. Blake looked at the letter. He didn't raise his voice, but his eyes grew sharp. He had seen many things in life, things far more serious than garden flowers, yet something about this small piece of paper carried a different kind of weight. "This is the third one this month," Maria said. "First, it was the mailbox paint, then the fence height, and now flowers. I'm tired of this." Blake stayed silent. He folded the letter once, then laid it flat again. He could feel Maria's frustration. For a moment, he thought about walking to the HOA office and speaking calmly with them. But before he could say anything, Maria stood up, grabbed the paper, and walked to the shredder in the corner. With steady hands, she pushed the fine into the shredder. The machine whirred and tore the letter into thin strips. Blake watched her in silence. "Enough is enough," Maria said firmly. "We are not their servants. We live in this house, we pay our dues, and we deserve peace." Blake gave a small smile. He admired her courage. But across the street, Karen was watching. Karen was the kind of neighbor who kept a notebook of rules and a sharp eye on everyone. She called herself the protector of Willow Creek standards, but others simply called her nosy. When she saw Maria shred the letter, her eyes widened. She whispered to herself, "Disrespect to the HOA cannot be allowed." Within minutes, Karen was on her phone. She called the HOA office first, then, without hesitation, she called the police. "Hello, officer," she said in her sharp voice. "My neighbor is destroying HOA property and refusing to follow rules. You must come right away." Back inside, Blake and Maria were sitting at the table. They had no idea what Karen was doing. Maria poured tea, trying to calm her nerves, while Blake leaned back, deep in thought. He had always lived quietly, never drawing attention, but he knew that sometimes peace was fragile. A patrol car pulled up outside their house half an hour later. The sound of the engine stopping made Maria's hand freeze on her cup. Blake stood up slowly. 2 officers stepped out. One of them was young, with a fresh face and a notebook in his hand. The other was older, his movements steady, his eyes trained by years of service. Karen ran out of her house before the officers even reached the door. "Officers, thank goodness you are here," she said loudly. "They are breaking HOA rules. They shredded the fine. This is serious. You must do something." Maria opened the door before Karen could say more. Her voice was calm. "Good afternoon, officers. May I help you?" The young officer cleared his throat. "Ma'am, we received a call about some trouble concerning HOA letters. Is that correct?" Maria looked at him without fear. "Yes, I shredded the letter." It was only paper. It was sent to our home, and I chose to remove it. Is that against the law? The young officer hesitated. He looked unsure. But the older officer stepped forward. He raised his eyes, and for the first time, his gaze landed on Blake, who was standing quietly behind Maria. The officer froze. His expression changed at once. His notebook slipped slightly from his hand. "Wait," the officer said in a low voice. "General Blake." Maria turned to look at her husband in surprise. Karen's mouth fell open. The young officer blinked in confusion. And Blake stood there, silent, his eyes steady, as if an old door from his past had suddenly opened. The air around them grew heavy. Who was Blake, and why did this officer call him General? Silence filled the doorway. Everyone's eyes were on Blake. The older officer's words still hung in the air. General Blake. Maria's heart raced as she turned to her husband. She had lived with him for years, shared every part of his life, yet he had never told her about being a general. Karen, who always believed she knew everything about everyone in the neighborhood, now looked lost. Her notebook of rules suddenly felt useless in her hands. The young officer looked from Blake to his partner, not understanding what was happening. Blake finally stepped forward. His voice was calm, steady, and deep. "I'm not a general anymore," he said. "That life ended years ago." The older officer straightened his back and gave a respectful nod. "With respect, sir, men like you do not stop being who they are. I served under your command once. I remember your leadership." Maria felt a mix of shock and pride. She wanted to ask 100 questions but stayed quiet, sensing that this was not the moment. Karen, however, found her voice. "General," she repeated, almost in disbelief. "You mean to say this quiet neighbor is some kind of military man? This is ridiculous. Officers, do your job. He and his wife are breaking HOA rules." The young officer shifted uncomfortably, but the older one raised his hand to stop her. "Ma'am, HOA rules are not criminal law. Shredding a letter is not a crime." Karen gasped. "But it's disrespect. It's against order." Blake's eyes narrowed. He had faced people who confused control with order many times before, and he saw the same look in Karen now. But he chose not to argue. Instead, he turned back to the officer. "If there is nothing else, I'd prefer you let my wife and me be." The older officer nodded. "Of course, sir." The young officer still looked puzzled, but he followed his partner back to the car. Before leaving, the older officer gave Blake a long look, filled with unspoken respect, then drove away. Karen stood in shock, unable to move. She had expected the police to punish Blake and Maria, not leave them untouched. She tightened her grip on her notebook. "This isn't over," she whispered to herself before storming back to her house. Maria closed the door and turned to Blake. "General," she asked softly. Blake sat down at the table. He rubbed his forehead, as if old memories weighed on him. "Yes," he admitted. "I was a general. I led men, I made choices, and I carried responsibilities that never leave you, even when the uniform does." Maria's eyes softened. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" "Because I wanted a simple life," Blake replied. "After years of battles, I wanted peace. I wanted to live as just a man, not a title. And you gave me that peace, Maria. That is why I never spoke of it." She reached across the table and took his hand. "Peace is worth protecting, Blake. But now others know. What will happen?" Blake's eyes darkened. "People like Karen won't stop. Once she senses power or mystery, she will dig deeper. And when she learns more, others may come too." Maria held his hand tighter. "Then we face it together." That evening, Willow Creek buzzed with whispers. News spread quickly that Blake was not an ordinary neighbor. Some said he was a war hero, others claimed he had secret ties to the government. Some doubted the story completely. But one thing was sure, curiosity about Blake had grown. Karen sat by her window, writing furiously in her notebook. She wrote down everything she had seen, every word she had heard. She was determined to uncover Blake's past and use it to her advantage. Meanwhile, Blake walked into his garage and pulled out an old wooden chest hidden beneath a tarp. He opened it slowly. Inside were medals, photos, and a folded uniform. Dust covered the fabric, but the memories behind it were clear as day. He stared at a photograph of himself with his unit. The faces of soldiers who had followed him stared back, reminding him of choices he had made long ago. For years, he had locked away that part of his life. But now, because of a shredded HOA letter, it was returning to his doorstep. Maria walked in quietly and stood beside him. "Do you regret hiding it?" she asked. "No," Blake said. "I regret that it might disturb the life we built here. But sometimes the past refuses to stay buried." That night, as the neighborhood lights went out one by one, Blake sat awake on the porch. His eyes scanned the quiet street, his mind sharper than usual. It was the same feeling he had before missions, the feeling that something was coming. Across the road, Karen's curtains moved slightly. She was awake too, watching, waiting, and planning her next step. Blake knew trouble was near. And this time, it would not be a battlefield in another country. It would be right here in Willow Creek. Morning came, and the sun rose gently over Willow Creek. To most neighbors, it was another ordinary day. Yet for Blake and Maria, the air felt different. Something unseen pressed on them, like the calm before a storm. Maria brewed coffee, but she noticed Blake was not eating. He sat at the table with his eyes fixed on the window, his mind far away. She placed a cup in front of him and touched his shoulder. "You did nothing wrong," she said softly. Blake gave a small nod. "Still, I can feel the change. Once curiosity begins, it rarely stops. People will talk, and some may come with questions I hope to avoid." Maria tried to stay strong. "We faced worse things together. This is just a neighborhood, not a battlefield." But both knew words did not change reality. Outside, whispers had already started. At the small park near the entrance of Willow Creek, a group of neighbors gathered. They often met there for morning walks, but today the talk was not about gardens or school schedules. It was about Blake. "I heard he was a general," said one man, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret. "My cousin in the army said the same," added another. "He led missions overseas. They say he was respected by many." A woman leaned closer. "Respected or feared? Sometimes those things are the same." Not far away, Karen stood with her arms crossed, listening. She had already told half the street about what the officer had said. Now, she let the rumors grow like fire on dry grass. By noon, Blake and Maria could feel the stares. Neighbors who once greeted them with simple smiles now paused longer, curious but cautious. Some looked with admiration, others with suspicion. Maria tried to ignore it, but Blake noticed everything. His eyes moved from one house to another, reading the unspoken words in the glances. He had lived through years where watching the crowd could mean survival. That skill never left him. Later that day, Karen made her move. She walked across the street holding a stack of papers, her notebook under her arm. Her knock on Blake's door was sharp, almost commanding. Maria opened the door, polite but firm. "Yes, Karen." Karen smiled, though her eyes were cold. "Good afternoon, Maria. I thought it would be best if we cleared a few things. You see, the neighborhood has concerns. And as a board member of the HOA, it is my duty to ask questions." Blake stepped into the doorway beside his wife. His presence made Karen stiffen for a second, but she quickly covered it. "General Blake," she said with a little laugh. "Or should I say Mr. Blake? Titles can be confusing." Blake's voice was calm. "Just Blake. That's enough." Karen tilted her head. "Of course. But you must understand, secrets in a community cause unrest. People deserve to know who lives among them. Don't you agree?" Maria crossed her arms. "Everyone deserves privacy. My husband's past is his own. It does not concern the HOA." Karen ignored her words and pressed on. "Imagine the reputation of Willow Creek if people discovered we had a decorated military leader living here. It could bring attention, perhaps even value to the neighborhood. But only if handled properly." Blake's eyes narrowed. "Handled properly? You mean controlled?" Karen's smile did not fade. "Call it what you wish. I only want what is best for this place. If you work with me, we could shape the story. If not, well, rumors often grow wild." The meaning was clear. She was threatening him, not with law but with gossip and influence. Blake did not respond right away. He studied her, the way he once studied opponents across a table during tense talks. Then he said slowly, "I did not fight for my country so I could return and live under the rule of fear in my own neighborhood." Karen's smile thinned. She turned on her heel and walked away, but Maria knew she would not stop. That night, Maria sat beside Blake on the porch. "She will try to use your past," she whispered. "I know," Blake said. "And others may come, not just her. Information spreads fast. If she digs deep enough, someone else might find me too." Maria looked at him with worry. "Do you think the past will knock on our door?" Blake kept his eyes on the quiet street. "It already has." At that same moment, far beyond Willow Creek, a man in a dark suit sat at a desk in a tall building. A file lay open in front of him, with Blake's name printed on the cover. The man tapped his finger on the page and picked up the phone. "Prepare a team," he said quietly. "It seems General Blake has resurfaced." Back in Willow Creek, the street was silent, but the calm was only an illusion. Karen was writing more notes, neighbors were whispering louder, and somewhere out there, people who once knew Blake were beginning to move. Maria leaned against her husband. "Whatever comes, we face it together." Blake placed his arm around her shoulders. "Together," he agreed. But in his heart, he knew the days of quiet were ending. The following morning, the neighborhood seemed peaceful, yet Blake knew peace could be misleading. He watered the flowers in the front yard while Maria trimmed the bushes. To anyone passing by, they looked like an ordinary couple caring for their home. But Blake's eyes kept scanning, watching every small movement around him. Across the street, Karen peeked through her curtains, her notebook open on the table. She had written pages filled with observations about Blake. Every detail mattered to her, from when he left the house to what time the lights went out at night. She was convinced there was more to uncover, and she would not stop until she found it. By midday, Maria suggested they take a walk to clear their minds. The air was warm, and birds sang on the trees. Yet even during the walk, Blake felt something different. Two unfamiliar cars were parked near the entrance of Willow Creek. The windows were dark, and the engines were off, but his instincts told him they were not ordinary visitors. "Blake," Maria said softly, noticing his sharp gaze, "do you think those cars are here for you?" "I don't think," Blake replied quietly. "I know." They returned home without finishing the walk. Maria tried to keep her calm, but worry pressed on her heart. Blake, however, moved with steady steps. He had been through this before. Shadows from the past always carried the same smell, the same silence before action. That evening, a knock came at their door. It was not sharp like Karen's knock, but firm and professional. Blake opened the door and found two men in suits standing on the porch. One of them showed a badge. "Good evening, Mr. Blake," the man said. "May we speak inside?" Blake studied them for a moment before answering. "You may speak here." The man nodded. "Very well. My name is Agent Cole, and this is Agent Harris. We are from a federal office that still keeps track of individuals with high-level service backgrounds. Your name has surfaced again, and we need to know your intentions." Maria stepped closer. "His intentions? He is retired. He just wants to live quietly." Agent Cole's expression stayed calm, but his words carried weight. "With respect, ma'am, men like General Blake do not simply retire. His knowledge, his experience, and his record make him valuable. Sometimes dangerous, if not monitored." Blake crossed his arms. "I served my country with loyalty. I left that life behind. I will not be dragged back into it." Agent Harris spoke for the first time. "We are not asking you to return, sir. We are asking you to be aware. There are groups who would want to find you, to use you. If your name is being spoken again, they may already be looking." Maria's heart tightened. "You mean we are not safe?" "Not unsafe yet," Cole said carefully. "But you should be cautious. The more attention you draw, the greater the risk." Blake gave a small nod. "Then we understand each other. I will protect my family, as I always have. But I will not be controlled by fear." The agents exchanged a look, then stepped back. "If anything unusual happens, contact us," Cole said, handing Blake a card. "And remember, silence can sometimes be your best shield." When they left, Maria sat down heavily on the couch. "Blake, this is more serious than I thought. Karen's gossip, the neighbors' whispers, it could spread further than we can stop." Blake sat beside her and held her hand. "We cannot stop people from talking. But we can control how we face what comes. I will not run from shadows. I faced storms before, and I will face this one too." Meanwhile, Karen had been watching from her window. She saw the men in suits leave Blake's house and hurried to write in her notebook. To her, this was proof that Blake was hiding something big. She imagined herself as the hero who would expose him to the neighborhood. She did not realize the danger she was pulling closer with every step. That night, Blake opened the wooden chest again. He touched the folded uniform, then the medals, but his focus stopped on an old map tucked at the bottom. It was marked with circles and notes, reminders of missions long past. He folded it back carefully, his mind heavy with memories. Maria joined him. "Do you think they will come for you?" she asked. "Not just for me," Blake answered. "If someone wants me, they will come through what I love most. That is why we must be ready." Outside, the two unfamiliar cars remained at the edge of Willow Creek. Inside one of them, a man raised a camera and clicked a photo of Blake's house. He lowered the lens and spoke into a small device. "Target located," he said quietly. "Waiting for orders." The night deepened, and Willow Creek looked calm, but the calm was only a mask. Trouble had already entered the neighborhood, and Blake knew it was only a matter of time before it reached his door. The next morning in Willow Creek began with soft sunlight and the sound of sprinklers turning on. Children rode bicycles down the street, and neighbors waved to one another. On the surface, it was a perfect suburban day. Yet Blake could feel the tension hiding beneath the quiet. He sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, his eyes drifting toward the end of the street. The same two cars were still parked near the entrance, and this time he noticed the faint glint of sunlight on glass. Someone inside was watching. Maria joined him with a plate of toast. She followed his gaze and saw the cars. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "They're still there." "Yes," Blake said. "They won't leave until they get what they came for." Maria placed the plate down. "Do you think they are the ones the agents warned us about?" "Most likely," Blake replied. "They won't act yet. They are studying, waiting for the right moment. Across the street, Karen was already outside with her notebook. She pretended to trim her roses, but her eyes kept flicking toward Blake's house. She had seen the cars too, and instead of fear, she felt excitement. To her, this was proof that Blake's past was bigger than anyone imagined. She began forming plans in her mind about how she could use this to her advantage. Later in the day, Blake decided to test his suspicions. He walked down the street as if heading to the park. His steps were calm, but his senses were sharp. When he neared the entrance, he glanced toward the cars. The men inside looked away quickly, pretending to read newspapers. Blake did not stop. He continued walking, passing the cars without a word, but he memorized their faces and posture. He could tell they were trained, not ordinary men. His instincts were rarely wrong. At the park, Blake sat on a bench. A father played catch with his son nearby, and joggers passed on the trail. Yet Blake's mind was on the watchers. He thought about his old life, the endless cycle of missions and shadows, and how it had followed him here. Maria joined him after a while, carrying a small basket of fruit. She sat beside him, pretending everything was normal. "We can't keep living like this," she whispered. "We won't," Blake said. "But we need to know what they want before we act." As they returned home, Blake noticed Karen standing at her mailbox, speaking to a neighbor in hushed tones. He caught a few words: government, danger, and secret. She was spreading rumors faster than fire, and he knew it would not take long before the entire neighborhood saw him not as Blake the neighbor, but as Blake the mystery. That evening, Blake set up a small table in the garage. He laid out a notebook, a flashlight, and an old compass. Maria watched him quietly. "You're preparing," she said softly. "I'm observing," Blake corrected. "If they watch us, I will watch them. If they plan, I will be ready before them." The hours passed, and night fell. Lights went out one by one across Willow Creek. Yet Blake stayed awake, sitting by the window with the curtains drawn just enough for him to see the street. At midnight, movement caught his eye. One of the cars at the entrance started and rolled slowly closer. It stopped 2 houses away, its lights off. A man stepped out, dressed in dark clothing. He moved with caution, scanning the street. Blake narrowed his eyes. The man wasn't here for casual observation anymore. This was a test, maybe even the beginning of something larger. Maria appeared beside him, whispering, "What is he doing?" "Looking for weakness," Blake answered. "Seeing how far he can go without being noticed." The man walked halfway toward Blake's yard, then paused as if measuring the distance. After a moment, he returned to the car and drove back to the entrance. Maria's hand trembled slightly. "They're getting closer." "Yes," Blake said. "And next time, they may not stop." Across the street, Karen's light was still on. She too had seen the man in black moving about, and her notebook was now filled with frantic notes. She thought she had uncovered the story of the year, but she did not understand the danger she was inviting into her own life. The following day, Blake received a plain envelope in his mailbox. There was no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with 3 words: "We found you." Blake folded the note and placed it back into the envelope. His face stayed calm, but Maria saw the storm in his eyes. "What does it mean?" she asked. "It means," Blake said slowly, "that the shadows no longer want to watch. They are preparing to step into the light." He placed the envelope into the wooden chest with his old medals and uniform. Then he looked at Maria. "We must be ready," he said. "Because the past has finally arrived at our door." The letter sat inside the wooden chest, but its weight felt heavy in the air. Maria tried to stay busy in the kitchen, but her hands trembled as she set the plates on the table. Blake sat in silence, his mind turning like a machine. At last, Maria broke the quiet. Blake, this is not just gossip anymore. This is danger. What if those men outside decide to do more than watch? What if Karen pushes things further? Blake looked at her with calm eyes. Then we are prepared. Fear gives them power. We cannot allow fear to rule this house. Maria nodded, but worry stayed in her heart. Outside, Willow Creek looked the same as always. Children played, sprinklers sprayed the lawns, and neighbors smiled politely. Yet whispers spread faster than ever. Some spoke of Blake with respect, calling him a hero. Others saw him as a threat, someone whose past might bring trouble to their peaceful street. Karen enjoyed every minute of it. She knocked on doors, shared her theories, and even hinted that government men had visited Blake's home. She believed she was uncovering the truth, but she did not see that she was placing herself in danger. That evening, Blake noticed movement again. The watchers were no longer staying at the edge of the neighborhood. One of the cars now parked only a few houses away. The men were stepping out more often, pretending to jog or walk dogs they clearly did not own. Their presence was becoming bolder. Blake decided he could not wait. He took Maria into the living room and spoke clearly. We may have to leave Willow Creek for a time. Staying may put you at risk. Maria's eyes filled with emotion. This is our home, Blake. We built a life here. If we run, Karen and the others will think we were guilty of something. I care nothing for what Karen thinks, Blake said firmly. I care for your safety. If I must choose between peace and protection, I will choose protection. Before Maria could answer, another knock came at the door. It was late, far past the time for polite visits. Blake opened the door carefully and found Agent Cole standing there again. His face was serious. Mr. Blake, Cole said. We need to talk. May I come in? Blake let him in. Maria stood close by, her eyes searching Cole's face. We warned you that others might take interest, Cole began. Our sources confirm it now. A private group has located you. They were once part of international operations, men who did not retire quietly. They see value in your skills. If they cannot recruit you, they may try to silence you. Maria gasped softly. Blake only nodded. I suspected as much. They are already watching. Yes, Cole said. But you must understand, they are patient hunters. They will not rush. They will test the ground first, looking for weakness. That note you received was their way of reminding you that they have the advantage. What do you want me to do? Blake asked. Cole paused. We want you under protection. Come with us, and we can move you to a safe location. Blake shook his head. I will not run. I have run enough in my life. If they come, I will face them here. Maria touched his arm. Blake, please think carefully. Cole's eyes hardened. Then at least let us set up support nearby. We cannot leave you undefended. Blake thought for a moment, then gave a small nod. Do what you must, but understand this. I will not be treated as a prisoner in my own home. Cole respected his words. He gave Maria a gentle nod before leaving. That night, the air in Willow Creek grew heavier. Maria tried to sleep, but every sound made her sit up in fear. Blake stayed awake by the window, watching as shadows moved under the streetlights. At 2 in the morning, he saw it. A figure slipped through Karen's yard, dressed in black. The man crouched by her window, taking photos of her notes left on the table. Blake's jaw tightened. Karen had pushed too far, and now she had drawn danger onto herself. He whispered to Maria, "Stay here," and stepped outside silently. The man in black did not see him coming. Blake moved like a shadow, his steps soundless on the grass. He caught the man's arm before he could escape and spoke in a low, commanding voice. "Who sent you?" The man twisted, trying to break free, but Blake's grip was iron. For a moment, their eyes met. Recognition flickered there. This was not a simple spy. This was someone who had known Blake's past. "General," the man whispered. "They will not stop." Then, with sudden force, he slipped from Blake's grasp and vanished into the dark, faster than ordinary men could run. Blake stood in the yard, his chest rising slowly. Maria appeared at the doorway, fear in her eyes. "Blake, what happened?" He walked back to her, his voice steady. "The storm is closer now. It touched our street tonight. And it will return." Maria's hand trembled in his. "Then what do we do?" Blake looked toward the wooden chest inside the house. "We prepare. The past is here, Maria. And this time, it will not leave quietly." The night after the shadow slipped through Karen's yard, the air in Willow Creek felt heavier than ever. The neighborhood looked peaceful on the outside, but Blake knew better. The watchers would return, and this time, they would not come just to look. Maria tried to keep her courage, but she could see the change in her husband. Blake's calm was deeper now, his silence sharper. It was the silence of a man preparing for battle. The next morning, Karen marched across the street with her notebook. She had seen the dark figure the night before and was convinced Blake was at the center of it. She knocked on the door loudly. Maria opened it, her face tired but polite. "What is it, Karen?" Karen pointed her pen like an arrow. "I saw men sneaking around last night. This is exactly what I've been saying. Blake is bringing danger to Willow Creek. You need to tell me the truth, or I will take this to the entire board." Before Maria could reply, Blake appeared behind her. His voice was steady. "Karen, listen carefully. What you saw last night was not because of us. But if you keep spreading rumors, you will make yourself a target. For your own safety, stop." Karen's face paled, but her pride would not let her back down. "You cannot scare me. I have every right to protect this neighborhood." Blake sighed. "Then protect it by staying quiet. Some wars are not yours to fight." Karen hesitated, then stormed back across the street. Yet Blake knew her stubbornness would only create more problems. That evening, Agent Cole returned with two black SUVs parked discreetly at the end of the street. He stepped inside with a serious face. "We picked up chatter," he said. "They are planning to move tonight. They want to test you, maybe force you out." Maria's hands tightened. "What does that mean?" Cole's eyes hardened. "It means we have to be ready for a direct approach. My men will stay close, but you know them better than we do. You'll sense their move before anyone else." Blake nodded calmly. "Then tonight, we end this." As the sun set, Willow Creek looked ordinary. Children played one last game before bedtime, sprinklers watered lawns, and lights flicked on in houses. But beneath the calm, shadows prepared to strike. Blake moved through his home, checking every window and door. He placed Maria in the safest room and spoke firmly. "No matter what happens, stay here until I come for you." Maria grabbed his hand. "Blake, don't face this alone." He gave her a steady look. "I am never alone. You are my strength. But I must protect you." Outside, the street grew silent. The cars that usually lined the road seemed fewer. Then, at midnight, the watchers arrived. Two black vans rolled slowly into Willow Creek, their headlights off. The vehicles stopped near Blake's house, and figures dressed in dark clothing stepped out. From across the street, Karen peeked through her curtains. Her heart pounded as she scribbled notes, too blind to see how real the danger had become. Blake stepped onto his porch, his figure calm against the glow of the porch light. He faced the men directly, his voice strong. "This is not your ground. Leave now." The leader of the group stepped forward, his face hidden under a cap. "General Blake," he said coldly. "You cannot hide forever. Come with us." You know too much to be left alone. Blake stood tall. I served with honor. I owe nothing to you. And I will not be taken. The men spread out, moving toward the house. But before they could advance further, Agent Cole and his team appeared from the shadows, weapons raised. That's far enough, Cole shouted. This area is secure. Leave immediately. The group hesitated, caught between retreat and fight. For a tense moment, the street felt frozen. Then the leader sneered. This is not over, General. We will find another way. With a sharp signal, the men slipped back into their vans. The engines roared, and within seconds, they were gone into the night. The silence that followed was heavy. Maria rushed out of the house and held Blake's arm tightly. Cole approached with relief. You handled that better than anyone else could. They came for power, but they left with nothing. Blake looked at the empty street. They will be back, or others will come. But I will not run. This is my home. My fight is here now. Maria pressed her head against his shoulder. Then we will face it together. Across the street, Karen stood frozen at her window. For the first time, she realized her notebook could not control this. She had wanted a story, but what she saw was too real, too dangerous. Slowly, she closed the curtains, her hand trembling. The next morning, Willow Creek woke up to find nothing unusual. Neighbors watered lawns, joggers passed by, and the sound of children laughing filled the air. No one knew how close danger had come in the night, except for Blake, Maria, Cole, and a shaken Karen. Blake sat on the porch once more, his eyes calm but alert. He knew peace was fragile, but he also knew something else. He was no longer just hiding from his past. He was facing it, and he was ready. Maria brought him a cup of tea and sat beside him. Do you think they will return? She asked softly. Blake gave a small smile. The shadows always return. But so does the light. And we are not afraid. In Willow Creek, the lawns shone green, the houses stood tall, and the quiet street seemed safe once more. Yet behind the calm, one man sat ready, a soldier at heart, guarding his home and his love, prepared for whatever came next.